Once again to Breakfast Central, state governors in Nigeria are pitching their tents with those opposed to 100,000 naira cash limit recently imposed by the Central Bank of Nigeria, the CBN. They believe the policy would hurt the economy and rural dwellers in particular. They also fear that the CBN action may set the masses against the administration of President Muhammadu Buhari and could constitute an unpalatable exit package for him when his second term expires on May 29th. 2023.
On this basis, they have resolved to send a delegation to the president to direct the CBN to review the policy. According to reports, the Nigeria Governors Forum (NGF) met on Thursday in Abuja to deliberate on the matter and take appropriate decision. A source at the session said the governors also resolved to appeal to Buhari to retain the prevailing cash withdrawal limits in the country and extend the January 30th, 2023 deadline for the phasing out of the redesigned Naira notes. Joining us now this morning to talk about this is Public Affairs Analyst Patrick Ugochukwu to throw more light. Good morning and thank you very much for joining us. First of all, it'd be great to have your thoughts on the new policy that the CBN is implementing. 2022 has been an interesting year when we look at the economic sector and the policies that have been introduced by the Central Bank of Nigeria. But what's your take on the withdrawal limits, the individual and the corporate withdrawal limits that the CBN has introduced?
Yeah, so I think it's key to understand why the CBN has come about these policies in the first place. So, if you look at the records online, it says about 85% of cash flowing in economies outside of the banking sector, right? If you're looking at controlling inflation, which is the primary mandate of the Central Bank of Nigeria, that's a bit worrisome for you. And if you're trying to bring down inflation is currently at 21.94%. What you have to do is mop up the excess cash in the system. So there's some merit to the CBN bringing out that policy. The problem with that will be that the time for implementation is too short. That it will have an awesome effects on the economy there. But I just would think that the reaction of the governors is a bit melodramatic, right? If we have to mop up the excess cash in the system, some of us have to make that sacrifices, right? Might not be palatable for everyone, but some sacrifices have to be made for us to mop up excess cash in the system.
Now let's talk about their angle. One of the arguments is that it would hurt the rural dwellers, and of course, pitch the citizens against President Muhammadu Buhari as he exits, from office in 2023. So are these facts, will those in rural areas, will those, who are running small and medium scale enterprises, will those, running agricultural business and small business here and there, will they really suffer as much as the governors have described?
Not necessarily. So I think we have to look at it in two ways, right? This government's National Bureau of Statistics came out last month to say that 133 million people or 133 million Nigerians live in poverty, right? Most of these people live in the rural areas of Nigeria. And if you're going by the UN definition of the poverty line, it says that people who live under less than $1 in a day, right? So black market rate, $1 to Naira is about 750 Naira. So about 133 million Nigerians, most of them trapped in the rural areas, right, live on less than 750 Naira in a day. If the CBN says that these guys can withdraw a minimum of 20,000 Naira every day, then there's not much of a complaint there, right? The main problem will be for POS operators who are basically the ones who facilitate the movement of cash in these rural areas. Most of them won't be able to do their businesses, right? Because 20,000 Naira is too small a cap for them to operate on a day-to-day basis. So the most important thing will be for us to try and get enough of these rural people, into the banking system, even if it's through the normal POS operators. Most of them bank with OPay, right? So what we can do is use that network of informal POS operators, try to get as many of them to register these rural dwellers into the banking system, and then find a way to then use these USSD codes to be able to transfer money around these guys in the rural areas. So it's more about how much political will and how much we're ready to work hard to bring these guys into the banking system. If the CBN can probably extend it to about 90 days, then it might be feasible, but 30 days would be too short.
Are we going to see maybe a review of that? The Nigerian governors are planning to send a delegate to President Muhammadu Buhari, asking him to review this policy by the CBN. Are there projections that we might be seeing an adjustment to that?
Yeah, you've got the governors applying a lot of pressure there. It would be rare to see President Muhammadu Buhari, after he's given his approval to the CBN, I think it would be rare for him to then engineer a reversal after much pressure has been mounted by the governors there. And let's not also forget that, in the NIPSS course of last couple of weeks, the president there was blaming the governors and local government chairmen for the fighting poverty across the land. I don't think he's one who is not going to, crumble under the pressure of these governors to reverse the policy. But I do expect that some form of middle ground will be reached between the governors and the president.
Well, two things I want to ask about. First of all is you just mentioned 90 days. That's roughly about 3-month period.
Yes.
We are very familiar with, the attitude that a lot of Nigerians have with government policies. The Nigerians are last-minute people. And so, if you remember also when there was conversations about getting registered, the NIN registrations and whatnot, it still took, a lot of cajoling, and a lot of pressure to get Nigerians to actually go ahead and do it. So do you think, that the CBN or the Nigerian government has gotten used to, simply just making its order and putting it in place instead of waiting for Nigerians to eventually get to do it? Because if you give them the 90-day rule, on the 85th day, that's when you still see Nigerians trying to, get accustomed to it. And then also, I want you to share your thoughts on this sudden love and care that Nigerian governors have for their citizens all of a sudden, and how now they have suddenly turned to very loving fathers caring about the rural dwellers.
Yeah, exactly. When I saw that report, I was laughing here, because according to them, they say that they are afraid that the masses will turn against the president and then it might tarnish the image in the last 90 days. I think we're all just fed up. Nigerians can't wait to see this administration leave and then usher in, hopefully what will be a new administration that gets things right. I think it is melodramatic and disingenuous by the governors to state that they are close, that they are close to the rural dwellers and as such can feel their pain. Because there's a large disconnection between governance in states and then the reality of life at the rural level. So I'm not sure anyone takes the statements of the governors seriously. We take it with a pinch of salt. As to whether Nigerians would be able to follow the guidelines within 90 days, I think as a people we're just very special. 90 days will never be enough for typical Nigerians. But I just think that the CBN has to give enough time for people to be able to adjust.
And let's talk about, how we've talked about the possibility of POS operators losing a lot of money. Are there maybe policies? Should this fly? Should the deadline still remain? I mean, we are saying that we are unlikely to see Mr. President change his mind. Let's talk about what the fate is for the POS operators. Are there maybe policies that can be implemented to incorporate them or make room for them to be able to withdraw beyond the regular limit?
Yeah, I think for the POS operators, what we should be looking at now would be for the banks to convert them into agents who can then register these rural dwellers and give them proper banking accounts, right? Even if it's the OP, if it's First Bank, whichever bank that has a wide network across these rural areas, they now have to use these POS operators, these informal guys, to bring in all these guys into the banking system. Like I said earlier, it's not something you can do within 30 to 60 days. It's something that you have to do between 90 days minimum, probably 120, 180 days, right? They are the ones who will be worst hit by these policies, and about 1.4 million of them are said to be operating these POS businesses. That's a whole lot of people. So it's something that's concerning. It's something that the CBN should look closely at. How do we get to provide an alternative for these 1.4 million people? That's a question that's beyond my scope.
Has the Nigerian government or the CBN or any of its agencies, in the past, shown to be considerate when you present statistics like this to them?
I don't think so.
I mean, the presence of the POS operators in the first place, has shown failure at some point. It's a failure of one part of the institutions and the mechanics, mechanisms, of the whole banking sector that, of course, have created these things. And so now people got to see that as a new source of income and some type of business. Go ahead. Can you hear us?
Oh, sorry, I didn't get the last part of the question.
I mean, I was just expanding on the question that I asked. If the Nigerian government has looked at these statistics ever and said, oh, 2 million people will be affected, 1.5 million people will be affected, so maybe we should have a rethink. The Nigerian government has not been known to do that.
Yeah, so obviously the government has its own National Bureau of Statistics, so it's guided by the statistics provided by this agency of government. The problem is that there's always a disconnect between the effect of government policy and then the palliatives or the alternatives that that you can offer to people who will be mostly affected by these policies. So yeah, I'm not sure that the government has considered these 1.4 million people at all in its policies. It will largely fall down to these people to find alternatives for themselves. Unfortunately, that's reality here in Nigeria.
What a scary and sad reality that is. And it's not just the POS operators. We are talking about these category of people earlier, the unbanked. According to reports, about 38 million Nigerians do not have bank accounts. And one wonders what becomes of them. And even for individuals, this past weekend, some of us would analyze the expenses we've made and see that limit will not even work for individuals. We're just going to count down the days and see how this eventually plays out. Thank you very much for joining us this morning on the show.
Hey, thank you for having me. Have a nice day too.
Have a lovely day.